Now that we've created and got the skeleton that we want, our final step on the rigging chapter is going to be to get this control rig in place and to make sure that the geometry follows the skeleton. Right, so what we have so far is a skeleton, and if we select any of these joints, we can use the rotate controller and that will move it. And you could animate this way if you wanted to, but Maya is much more powerful than that, and it has some really cool tools that you can use. The way that we want to access this first of all is if we just go to definition, and then we've got some additional controls across the top, and there's this one here, which is create control rig. If we click on that, you'll see that the skeleton starts to look a little bit different, and we've got lots of these extra controls here. And this is what we want. So now, instead of having to rotate, I can grab this circle here, put my move tool on, and then just move that hand around. You can see at the moment we haven't attached the geometry to it, but the skeleton is now moving in what's called inverse kinematics, which means that it's doing the maths. If I move the hand, it'll calculate what needs to happen with all the other joints to get that hand over there. The same applies with the hips, like that, and also with things like the shoulders. So that's brilliant. We've also got the fact that the skeleton's still there. And you'll see that with my move tool, this really doesn't want to move. But with my rotate tool, it does. And that's because it gives us the ability to animate with both forward kinematics, which is when you rotate each bone individually, and inverse kinematics, where you select a controller and you can just kind of move it around. So that's brilliant, isn't it? I'm a big, big fan of that. So now that we've got that, there are a few things about it we can change. So at the moment, we've got this selected, which is full body. And you see that if I move this, the whole thing goes. We can change this here, and instead of full body, it'll just move the arm, which can be better for making sure that you don't completely lose control. And then there is this one, which is just for the selection, but in this case, you can't do anything with it. That would only work on forward kinematics, really. And you can also change, so I'm just going to put that back. You can also change the look of these controls. So if we go into this little blue drop-down menu here, and to edit control rig, there's a rig look. And at the moment we're on wire. But if you want box instead, so that you want this to be a little bit easier to see, you can change that. And there is also the option to have stick, which looks like that. And this is down to personal preference. My preference is the wire, because that's the one I'm used to. But you can choose whichever one you're most comfortable with. They just look different, and they all work the same. Okay then, now that we have set up this control rig for our skeleton, we need to make it so the geometry is going to follow that skeleton. So here's what we'll do for that. We need to just turn off the forward kinematics and the inverse kinematics. So this is the two types of control that Maya just created for us. And we're going to click on this icon here, which turns back on the original skeleton. And this is what we're going to make sure all the geometry follows. And I'll try and demonstrate this as clearly as I can. So what we need to do first of all is select a piece of geometry. And we're going to start with the hips. And then we need to select the piece of the skeleton that we want that geometry to follow when it moves. And I'm just going to turn off the move tool for this. So I've got that, and I want this to follow this joint here. So I'm going to shift select the hips. And because this is in a hierarchy, you'll see it selects the whole rig, but that's not a problem. And then what we need to do is parent the geometry to the rig. So selecting in that order was important. Geometry, then joint, and then you can go to edit and parent. Or I'll show you on the next joint. So this one here, I'm also going to parent to the same joint. So shift select. And this time I'm just going to press P on my keyboard. And now if I was to move this skeleton, you would see that, although this whole skeleton doesn't go with it, but you would see that when I move that joint, that goes with it, which is good. Next up, we're going to select the torso, and that's going to follow this joint. So then we'll press P. Lovely. The next piece of geometry that I'm interested in is this one here, and I'm going to have this follow the clavicle. Oh, no, let's just select that properly. And then press P. Then we'll start moving down the arm. So this upper arm is going to follow this shoulder joint. So I'll press P. And you'll notice that if I want to select the bone, I can go like this. and that will only select the bone because there's a order of priority in which Maya will let you select things. So if I want to select the geometry, I can click on it, but if I want to select the bone, I can click and drag. And that can make selecting things that I want now really easy. So if I click on this part of the geometry here, and then just hold shift and drag, I can select the bone and press P. Same for this piece of geometry, shift and drag to get selection and press P. So both of these lower arm sections have gone on the lower part of there. I'm also going to have this parented to that same bone. And then for the hand, it's going to be which bits I want to follow what. So let's just press, what am I pressing? F. And then we'll select that piece of geometry and this joint. Let's turn my move tool off again. P, this piece of geometry and this joint. P, this piece of geometry and this joint. P, this piece of geometry and this joint. P, this piece of geometry and this joint, and P. Okay, and at this stage, I'm just going to test a few things out. So let's just turn back on the controllers here. So we'll get that there, and we'll move the arm and make sure that things are following as I would expect it to. And that looks pretty good. And then we'll just select this hips controller and move him up and down. Yeah, and then all the torso and the arms going with it so far. So then we'll just turn that back off, and we can keep going. So next up, we're going to have this piece of geometry here. Now, as I said earlier, we don't really want this to move. The reason that it's a black material that you can't really see any detail on is that the audience, the player, will just assume that's moving. So we'll select that, and we're actually going to parent it to that joint there. Just turn my move tool off again. This upper leg part is going to be parented to the upper leg joint. The first lower leg part is going to go to the lower leg joint. And then the second lower leg part is going on the lower leg joint as well. And finally, the foot is going to go on the foot joint, P. And the final thing to do now is just get the head attached and the neck as well. Don't forget the neck like we did earlier with the material. So I'm going to select that bit there, and that's going to be parented to this joint here. Okay. Same for this. I'm going to parent it to that joint there. And for the head, select the head, shift select this joint in the head, press P. And then for the aerial, or the antenna, I'm going to select that and actually just parent that to the rest of the head. Okay. Now, what I'm going to do is, I've just done one side. What I'll do now is just fast forward me doing the other side, so you can see what I'm doing, but it's going to be identical to what I did on this side. There's just no way of mirroring this. We have to do this the old school way. So here we go. Okay, I think I'm done then. And the reason I say I think I'm done is it's really easy to just miss something or to parent something that you didn't mean to the wrong thing, etc. So now we need to test. So we'll turn that skeleton off. We're going to turn back on these controllers here, and we just need to test him out. So we'll grab his hips, get our move controller, and we'll just try and move him around. That looks good. Everything's moving there as I would expect it to. Let's grab a leg and move that around. Okay, that's actually the foot control. I wanted this one. Yep, that looks okay. And everything's kind of doing IK where I'd expect it to. Just check the other leg. Looking good. Check an arm. Yep. Check the other arm. Yep. Check the head. So you can use the move control on the head. I actually prefer to use the rotate on the head. Yeah, that looks okay. And we'll just move his head side to side. Yep, good stuff. And then finally, let's just check the fingers. And you get this kind of cool finger controller on the end here, which is kind of nice. And we can rotate that, and that will kind of make a fist for us. And there's one on the thumb as well. Let's have a go at that. Doesn't really behave in the same way. There we go. But it looks like that is working as expected. We'll just check this knuckle joint there. Yeah. So what you should do now is continue to check everything, make sure that everything behaves as expected, and if it doesn't, redo it. Now what we need to do is just a couple of loose end tying up things. So we'll go back to, where are we? Channel box layer editor. We have our geo layer, and what we want to do is make that reference. So now we just can't select it. We can still move it by moving the controls. Here we go, look. But we can't accidentally select it and break anything. So that's good really, isn't it? What we're also going to do is make sure that we save this as its very own file. Because this is now a rig that we're happy with. It works as expected. Rigs can be a little bit temperamental and can break. And so we're going to save this and then never work on this again unless we have to. This is just something we can go back to if the rig breaks down the line. So we're going to do File, Save Scene As, and I'm just going to call this Clean Rig. Like that. And then I know I've always got a clean rig. There we go. And that's it. We've completed another chapter, and you have now got a rigged character who is ready to be animated and then eventually put into Unreal Engine, and he's going to look so sick. So I hope you're excited about the next chapter. It's going to be a long one. It's going to include all the animation. So I look forward to seeing you all excited for animation in the next step. I'm able to continue making these videos thanks to the ongoing support of my amazing Patreon community. If you'd also like to support Game Dev Academy via Patreon, then check out the link in the description below. Thank you.